the time, it felt like a normal day. I was 21, in college, working part-time and living alone in a cheaper apartment building because it was what I could afford. It wasn't the kind of place you bragged about, but it was close enough to campus that I could get there without paying for parking, and the rent didn't swallow my whole paycheck. That week, my schedule was weird because there'd been a power issue at work, so I got cut loose early one afternoon. I took my usual bus and went straight to class. Afterward, I ended up at a friend's place for a bit, and by the time I finally got back to my building, it was late enough that the lobby had that quiet, hollow sound. When I walked in, I noticed a guy sitting near the apartments on the ground floor, kind of posted up like he was waiting. I didn't recognize him, but it wasn't unusual to see someone you'd never met in that building, so I told myself he was visiting somebody. I kept moving, unlocked my door, went inside, and tried to shake the feeling that he'd looked up a little too fast when I entered. The night was almost normal after that. I put something on the TV, did the mindless scroll thing, and tried to settle down. Around 11 p.m., I was getting ready for bed when I heard a loud sound from the hall, sharp, like a door hitting a frame hard enough to rattle. Then I saw my own door wasn't sitting right. It wasn't wide open, but it wasn't fully closed either. Just off. Like it had shifted, or the latch hadn't caught. I stood there staring at it like my brain couldn't accept what I was seeing. I didn't rush out into the hall. I didn't throw the door open and yell. I just froze, listening for anything. Footsteps, breathing, someone fumbling with a lock. Nothing. My first thought was, maybe I didn't close it all the way. Then the second thought hit right behind it. No, I'm obsessive about that. I called a friend who lived close, and he came over fast. We checked every room like we were trying to convince ourselves this was a misunderstanding. Closets, bathroom, behind the shower curtain, under the bed. It was humiliating, honestly, because part of me expected to find nothing and feel stupid. We found nothing. But the feeling didn't go away. Not even a little. My building had security cameras in the common areas, so we went down and spoke with the guard. The guard acted like it was a hassle, like we were interrupting his night, but he agreed to pull up the feed. When the footage came up, my stomach dropped in a way I still remember clearly. The guy from earlier, the one I'd seen sitting around, walked right up to my door. He didn't hesitate. He didn't knock. He tried the handle like he'd done it before. Then he got it open. On the video, you can see him step inside, just past the threshold, like he's testing whether anyone is home. And then, suddenly, he bolts. Not a casual walk away, a sprint toward the exit. It was like he'd heard something, or realized how exposed he was, or didn't like whatever was happening in the hallway. I don't know what stopped him from coming farther in, but I do know what it felt like watching someone enter my place like it was nothing. The building went into that weird state where everybody has an opinion, and none of it helps. People asked if I knew him. People said maybe I left my door unlocked. People said the guard probably let him in, then denied it. Someone suggested it could have been a prank, like breaking into an apartment is some kind of joke. We called the police. They came, took a report, watched the video, and asked around. No one knew him. Not even the guard, which was the part that bothered me most. Because that meant he wasn't some random guy who wandered in by mistake. He got into the building and moved like he belonged there. After that, I changed everything. I stopped taking the same route home every day. I made sure I wasn't walking in with my keys in my hand like a sign that I lived there. I tightened up my locks, added a cheap secondary lock, and I started checking my door twice before bed like a ritual I couldn't skip. I kept replaying the part where he got inside, just for a second, and imagining what would have happened if I'd walked into my apartment while he was still standing there, or if he'd been more patient. The scariest thing wasn't that he tried my door. It was how comfortable he looked doing it. This happened my freshman year of university, during that phase where you still feel like everything is a new experience, and you're reckless without realizing you're being reckless. A few of us had finished a long week and decided to drive out to a viewpoint just outside town. It was one of those spots students talked about like it was a tradition. Nice view, quiet. You sit there and decompress. It wasn't completely remote, but it wasn't right in town either. You had to take a dirt road for a bit. and there were patches where your phone signal went weak. The kind of place that felt private enough to relax, but close enough that you told yourself it was still safe. We pulled up with maybe half an hour of daylight left. No other cars, which felt like good luck. We parked, talked, watched the sky change, and for a while it was exactly what we wanted. Then I turned my head and looked out the passenger side window. At first my brain didn't even process it. It was just shapes and shadows where there shouldn't be shapes and shadows. A movement that wasn't the wind. A little too still. I stared harder, and the scene came into focus in the worst way. There were 4 men crouched in the bushes, not far away. Close enough that if any of us stepped out and walked a few feet, they could have been on us in seconds. They weren't walking by. They weren't looking for something they dropped. They were watching the car, and they were waiting. All I could think was, they're positioned like that on purpose. You don't crouch in brush like you're hunting unless you're trying not to be seen. And the creepiest part was how still they were. Not fidgeting, not whispering, not arguing, just focused. I didn't try to play it cool. I didn't say, "Hey guys, what's up?" like some fearless idiot. I said, loud and sharp, "Drive, now!" My friend in the driver's seat didn't ask questions. He saw my face and hit the gas immediately. Gravel kicked up behind us and the car lurched forward hard enough to throw us back into our seats. As we pulled away, I looked over my shoulder through the rear window, and that's when 2 of the men stood up and stepped toward the road like they were ready for the next part of the plan. Like they expected doors to open. Like they expected us to be outside. We didn't give them that. We stayed in the car and we kept moving, and within seconds the bushes and the viewpoint were behind us. Nobody chased the car. Nobody threw anything. They didn't need to, because whatever they were going to do, it required us to get out first. On the drive back, the energy in the car was dead quiet. No jokes, no, that was crazy, no trying to turn it into a story. Just everyone processing the same thought in their own head. If we'd gotten out. We argued later about whether we should report it. Part of us didn't want to deal with police or sound dramatic, or explain why we were out there in the first place. But the other part of us couldn't ignore how deliberate it looked. In the end, we did report it, even if it felt pointless. We gave the location, the time, the number of guys, the way they were positioned. We didn't have plates, we didn't have faces, and I'm not going to pretend it turned into some clean TV ending where the cops caught them the next day. What it did do was change our behavior. We stopped going to that viewpoint. We warned other students. We stopped romanticizing quiet spots outside town like they were automatically safe. And we learned something that sticks with me even now. Sometimes the difference between a good night and a nightmare is as simple as not opening a car door. This was during college, one of those summers where you sublease a room because everyone's gone and you just need somewhere cheap to sleep. The house was built for students. Multiple bedrooms, shared kitchen, the usual setup. For most of that summer, I was alone there, which I didn't love, but I told myself it was temporary. A friend had asked if I could keep a rescue dog for a while. She was a pit mix, big and muscular in a way that made her look like she'd been built for a job. Her name was June, and she was still getting used to people, still learning that a house wasn't a place where you had to stay tense all the time. By the 3rd or 4th night, she'd settled into the routine. She slept in my room, and I slept better with her there because, honestly, it made me feel less alone. That morning, I woke up to a sound that didn't register at first. Heavy breathing, claws on the floor, and a low noise I'd never heard from her before. When my eyes opened, I saw her at the bedroom door with her whole body tight, staring at the handle like it was an enemy. Then she slammed into the door, not once, over and over. It wasn't playful. It wasn't excitement. It was warning. I sat up and listened, and under the dog's movement I could hear it, a faint jiggle at the handle. Someone testing it carefully, like they didn't want the sound to carry. I didn't shout. I didn't get out of bed and fling the door open. I kept my voice steady and called out, "Who's there?" A man answered from the other side, too quickly. "Maintenance." That word is supposed to calm you down. It's supposed to explain everything. But nothing about this felt normal. It was barely after sunrise, and I hadn't put in any request for work. I said, "I didn't call for maintenance." Another voice chimed in like they were trying to sound casual. "We're fixing something. Dishwasher." The dishwasher wasn't even near my room, and they weren't near the kitchen. They were at my bedroom door. June let out a snarl that sounded like it came from somewhere deeper than anger. My heart started pounding in that slow, heavy way you feel when you're waking up into a threat. I didn't threaten them. I didn't try to negotiate. I made it very clear I was awake and not alone. Then the hallway went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where someone is still standing there, thinking. The kind of quiet where they're listening to decide if the house is worth the risk. I moved to the door, keeping June behind me, and cracked it only enough to look. There were 3 men, no uniforms, no tools, no clipboard. Just 3 guys standing too close to each other, like they'd come in together and didn't want to separate. One of them tried again. "We were told no one was here." I said, "Leave." They hesitated, just a beat, like they were recalculating. And then, without another word, they turned and walked away. As soon as they were gone, the adrenaline hit hard enough that my hands started shaking. I checked the front door first. It was locked. Then I checked the back door. It was unlocked. I know it was locked the night before. I was the kind of person who checked twice, who never went to sleep with a door open, especially when I was alone. The back door was the one that faced the alley where everyone parked, and it was the easiest way for someone to slip in without being seen. I called the leasing office as soon as it opened. I explained what happened and asked if maintenance had been dispatched. They told me flat out, no one had been sent. Nobody was scheduled. They asked for descriptions. I gave them what I could. It didn't feel like enough, but I said it anyway. I filed a report. I added extra locks. I stopped assuming student housing meant safe. And I kept June with me for the rest of the summer, because after that morning, it didn't feel like she was just a dog I was watching. It felt like she was the reason I didn't open that bedroom door to something worse. At the time, I was in my early 30s, using my education benefits to go back to school. I had a weird schedule, classes, a job, and the kind of exhaustion where you stop making smart choices because you just want one night that feels easy. I didn't have much time to meet people, so I used apps. Nothing wild, just the usual scrolling, a couple conversations that go nowhere, and then one match that actually felt normal. We talked for a bit, and she seemed put together. Quick replies, jokes that landed, and a plan that wasn't complicated. We agreed to meet at a bar restaurant that was close enough for both of us. Public place, good lighting, normal. When we met, she looked like her photos. She was friendly in that practiced way people get after enough first dates. We talked about school, work, the boring stuff that helps you figure out if someone's safe. About an hour in, she mentioned she worked at a police station, but not as an officer, more like a desk job. I remember thinking it was a weird detail to offer, but it didn't feel like a red flag, more like she was trying to sound responsible. She also said her roommate was out of town for the holidays. Then she added, casually, that she hated being alone because she had an ex who stalked her a little. I paused on that. I told her that wasn't a small thing, and she waved it off like I was being dramatic. "He's harmless," she said. "He just gets in his feelings." That should have been the moment I called it a night. But nothing else felt off yet. She was charming. The place was busy. I told myself she was just venting. A bit later, she suggested we go back to her place. I didn't push it. I didn't even bring it up. She suggested it like it was normal, like we were just continuing the night. Then she insisted on driving. I told her I was fine. I hadn't had much. But she kept pushing, saying she'd seen too many DUIs at work and didn't want anything happening. It sounded responsible, but it was also controlling, like she wanted to steer the whole situation. I let it happen, mostly because I didn't feel like arguing. The drive wasn't long. We pulled into her neighborhood, and the whole time she talked like nothing was wrong. She didn't seem nervous about being alone. She didn't check mirrors. She didn't do any of the stuff people do when they're actually worried they're being followed. We parked, walked up, and she went to the front door. Then she opened it without unlocking it. It was already unlatched. She didn't freeze. She didn't curse. She didn't do that little stiff inhale people do when they're surprised. She just walked in like it was normal. That was the first moment my body got ahead of my brain. My shoulders tightened. My eyes went straight to the corners of the room. I didn't even realize I was scanning until I caught myself doing it. Inside, she acted totally relaxed. She went to the kitchen, fed her cat, started talking like we were in a sitcom. While she was doing that, I noticed something on the counter. A bowl, like someone had just eaten. The thing that made me stare was how fresh it looked. Not dried out, not abandoned for hours. Just there, like someone stepped away from it. I asked, lightly, "Roommate leave that?" She hesitated, just for a fraction. Then she said, "Oh, that was me. I had a snack before I left." It didn't match the timeline. Not clean enough for that. Not old enough for that. It also didn't match the story of someone who's scared of being alone. Before I could think too hard about it, she closed the distance and kissed me. Not romantic, strategic, like she was interrupting my thoughts. Then she said we should go to her room. I followed, but I wasn't relaxed anymore. I was alert in a way I hadn't been in a long time. Not panicked, just listening, paying attention to the house sounds, floorboards, air vents, distant traffic. We got to the bedroom, and the first thing I did was go toward the curtains. Habit. I didn't even think. She stopped me. "Leave them open," she said. I looked at her. "Why?" She smiled like I was being cute. "I just like it." That was the second moment my body reacted before my brain. Because no one who's worried about an ex stalking them wants open curtains at night. Not in a bedroom. I didn't say anything, but I stepped away from the window and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to decide if I was overthinking. I kept telling myself it was fine, that it was awkward first date stuff. Then it happened fast. A few minutes later, she made a sharp sound, like a gasp she couldn't hold back. Her eyes locked on the window behind me. I turned. There was a figure outside, hoodie up, close enough that I could see the outline clearly. And as soon as we made eye contact, the figure moved, fast, out of view. Footsteps on the deck. Then nothing. I stood up immediately and moved toward the front of the house. My brain went straight to the doors. The front door wasn't locked. That's not a small oversight. That's the kind of thing you notice, especially if you've just told someone you have a stalker. I locked it and put my hand on the knob, listening. A second later, the door started banging, hard. Not a polite knock, not, "Hey, I forgot something." It was a hit and rattle, like someone was trying to shock whoever was inside into reacting. I turned toward her, expecting her to be panicking, crying, calling someone, anything. She wasn't. She was standing near the bed, calm, almost annoyed, and she said, "Just come back." I stared at her. "Are you serious?" "It's fine," she said. "He does this. He goes away." That sentence put everything into place. Not because it explained it, because it didn't. If he does this, then why is the door unlocked? Why are the curtains open? Why is she acting like this is routine? The banging moved to another part of the house, a thud along the side wall, like he was circling. I said, "Call the police." She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't even look at it. She just repeated, "He'll go away." And that's when I stopped thinking about her as a victim and started thinking about her as part of the problem. I didn't know what I was in, if it was her ex or someone else, if it was intimidation, robbery, or some setup where I'd end up outside with two people waiting. I didn't know if calling the cops would help or make it worse, because she'd already told me she worked around them. I also didn't have my car there. I'd let her drive. So I did the one thing I could do without asking her permission. I quietly ordered a rideshare. I didn't announce it. I didn't say, "I'm leaving." I stayed near the door, talking just enough to keep her from realizing I was counting seconds. I asked questions I already knew she wouldn't answer honestly. Why was your door open? Why are the curtains open? Why didn't you lock the front door? She got defensive. Her story started changing. She tried to pull the conversation back into the bedroom like that would reset the night. The banging stopped. That was almost worse, because now I didn't know where he was. When the ride-share notification popped up, I moved fast. Shoes, jacket, keys. I opened the door and walked out like I belonged there. I didn't run at first. I didn't want to look like prey. Then I hit the driveway and I ran. I got into the car, shut the door, and only when we were moving did I breathe normally again. I looked back, and she was standing in the doorway watching, not chasing, not calling out, just watching. It wasn't the face of someone terrified. It was the face of someone waiting to see if the plan worked. On the way back, I did what I could. I reported her profile. I told the bar staff what happened, in case she tried the same thing with someone else. I made a non-emergency report, not because I expected a dramatic arrest, but because I wanted a record in case it escalated for somebody. And I changed how I handle nice nights after that. Because the truth is, I don't know if it was a sloppy setup or just two unstable people in a toxic routine. I don't know if I was close to being robbed, jumped, or dragged into something I couldn't talk my way out of. What I do know is this. Her door was already open when we arrived, and she never once acted surprised.